A few thoughts on website builders such as Wix, WordPress and Squarespace. These are very good tools and they have good user interfaces, are quite intuitive, and providing that you can put the time in and persevere, you can build your own website without having to learn anything about HTML, CSS, JavaScript or PHP. PHP is what WordPress is written in. It's also what I wrote targetweb.com in. And I'll admit that there are many quote-unquote web designers out there these days who make their living purely by using website builders without having that depth of knowledge of code which I started acquiring way back in 1996. Now, sticking with WordPress for the time being, WordPress provides access to plugins. Plugins are like pieces of code or functionality which you can apply to your website. In some cases, the functionality is really useful. In some cases, it's not. But in most cases, the amount of code that gets added to your WordPress website is pretty huge. And I tend to have a problem with that. I'll give you an example why. When I tried WordPress for myself the first time, I created the most basic web page that I created for years. No functionality on it. It was a very, very basic web page. I just wanted to see what WordPress had built it with. So when I looked on the web server, I saw all this code. There were library files, JavaScript files, CSS files, and tons of them. They were all big. And it shocked me, quite honestly, because I would estimate that the amount of code that was there for that one web page, that one WordPress web page, was probably 20 or so times more than the entire amount of code that the targetweb.com website uses. And at the moment, I would say that there's about 60 pages to this website. But I realise that that code is necessary in order to provide people with the means of dragging images and content into a template and moving those things around, styling them, shaping them, colouring them, adding borders or shadows or things like that. And that's all well and good. The problem I have with it is that there's so much of it, and anyone who uses those web pages or accesses those web pages ends up having to download that code onto their mobile phone or onto their laptop in order to view the web page, and that usually makes for a very slow website. So I think it's fair to say that I wasn't initially a huge fan of website builders. I can appreciate their appeal. And I can appreciate some of the functionality that they add. They definitely do have their place. If I was asked which website builder I would prefer, I haven't mentioned it yet, but I would actually go for Webflow. Webflow is as intuitive as many of the others, and the amount of code that it produces is much, much leaner. Probably more akin to what I would produce myself if I was writing it by hand. So definitely Webflow for me, and also find that their support is very good too.